How much time do you want me to wait, Laura?
A minute or two,
Okay.
because everyone was in a waiting room, so they should be.
Are you not in the correct room?
And then Mary, when you're done with your introductions, Michelle's gonna she's gonna do her screen share.
Okay.
And welcome to everyone who's logging on. We're going to wait a few minutes till everyone's fully logged on and then get started. And we'll hand it off to Mary Harmon, the president of Tri-Counties.
And we are recording this. So if anybody misses it or wants to view it again, you'll be able to find it on the Tri-Counties website on the Government Affairs page. And it should be up in about 24 to 36 hours after this is over.
It looks like we should be ready to go if you want to get started here, Mary, and then the rest logging in can catch up.
Okay, thanks, Christine. Good afternoon, fellow members and guests. My name is Mary Harmon, and I'm your 2020 president of the Tri-Counties Association of Realtors. I want to welcome you to our legislative town hall with LA County Tax Assessor Jeffrey Prang. We bring you these events so as realtors, you can have the most up-to-date information that affects not only our industry, but the communities you work in. We believe that more education you have, the better you serve your clients and your community. With that in mind, Tri-Counties has some upcoming webinars I want to share with you on November 4th. We're holding our second legal panel this year at 10 a.m. This meeting's esteemed panelists will be Robert Bloom, Senior Counsel with CAR, Jeff Samantana, Director of Compliance with CRMLS, and John Giardinelli, Association Counsel. The panel will be moderated by Ed Estes, Professor and Real Estate Coordinator at Mount SAC. The big topic at this panel will be property management. If you do any property management at all, you know things are changing rapidly, or if you have clients that are doing property management. This is a chance for you to hear what the experts say and get your questions answered. Again, it's Wednesday, November 4th from 10 to 12 p.m. Make sure to register soon. You want to be sure not to miss it. The very next day, Tri-Counties Global Business Council is having their event, and the theme is the best countries to retire in. International Living put out their top 10 countries to retire in. So we'll hear from Costa Rica, Portugal, and Ecuador. This should be really interesting. This event is on Thursday, November 5th from 3 to 5 p.m. You can register for both of these events on the Tri-Counties website at www.tricorealtors.com. Just a few Zoom reminders of question and answers. Any questions, please put them in the Q&A box and we'll get to as many of them as we can. If you put them in the chat, they may get overlooked. A gentle reminder, this is a legislative update on real estate issues and ballot propositions. No discussion should occur about the election, politics, or fundraising, sorry. I would be remiss if I did not introduce my executive board and people that work very hard to make this happen. Brian Yeats, he's our president-elect. Larry Black, our secretary-treasurer. Laura Helverson, she's our executive vice president and she makes the magic happen. Phil Hawkins, our CEO. And also in attendance today is Tri-Counties Government Affairs team, Tim Shaw and Christine Schechter. Now let me introduce Assessor Prang. Los Angeles County Assessor Jeff Prang is in his second term, having been first elected in 2014 and then again by a wide margin in 2018. Mr. Prang is a product of the Midwest, born in Detroit, raised in Warren, Michigan, and began his career as a realtor with RE/MAX in Warren, Michigan. Mr. Prang graduated from Michigan State University before relocating to California, where he served for nearly 18 years. as a West Hollywood City Council member, as well as 4 terms as the city's mayor, among many other positions in the public sector. Upon taking office in 2014 as the Los Angeles County Assessor, Mr. Prang implemented sweeping reforms to ensure that the strictest ethical guidelines rooted in fairness, accuracy, and integrity would be adhered to in his office. The Los Angeles County Assessor's Office is the largest office of its kind in the nation, with 1,400 employees, and provides a foundation for a property tax system that generates $17 billion annually. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Los Angeles County Assessor, Jeff Prang.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with all of you today. Hope everybody is staying safe and secure in the midst of this COVID pandemic, and hoping that we all get through it quickly. I want to thank you, Mary, and as well as Christine and Tim for helping set up this meeting and giving me this opportunity to speak with you and give you a little bit of a insight as to what my office does and what we've been doing, and a little bit of snapshot of the current real estate market and some public policy issues that are much on our mind. I usually like to start my speeches by telling people what I don't do, and that is I do not collect taxes. I'm sometimes referred to as the tax assessor, which is technically incorrect. There's no such thing as tax assessors in California. We have assessors and tax collectors. The other guy who collects taxes has a very intuitive title. He's called the tax collector. But the reason I say that is because, as you know, local government can be quite opaque, and trying to get things done can often be very frustrating. And perhaps nowhere is this more frustrating than with property taxes, where a series of complex laws and a multi-agency system oftentimes place taxpayers at a loss on how to resolve even the most simple of issues and who even to call. So my intent today is to illuminate that system for you while providing an overview of my role as an elected official. I'm going to talk a little bit about the 2020 assessment role, the challenges of COVID, and finally some policy changes proposed on November's ballot. So many of you already know a lot about the particulars of my office, but for those who don't, let me share you with a snapshot. I administered a department with nearly 1,400 employees located in 6 offices throughout the county. About half of my employees are appraisers. Our budget is close to $200 million, and we are the largest local assessment agency in the country. As assessor, I'm one of 3 elected officials countywide. The other 2 are much more famous than me, the sheriff and the district attorney. But probably in many ways, my office is the most important because we are essentially the fiscal engine of local government. We determine the value of all taxable property in the county. These values are then used to calculate property taxes, which in turn provide revenue for local government to provide those vital services that we all depend on: county services, municipal services, as well as public schools. As you can see on the chart on your screen, the assessor has a symbiotic relationship with several other departments, each of them which has their own piece of property tax administration, primarily the auditor controller, as well as the treasurer tax collector. So the way it works is when my department receives a copy of a deed from the registrar of quarter, or a building permit or building plans from the cities, we then do the assessment of value. It's the auditor controller who tells you what you owe. And then it's the treasurer tax collector who mails the bills and collects the payments. This year, property tax revenue that start with my office's valuation will provide over $17 billion for vital public services, which are needed now more than ever because revenue from sales taxes, tourism, and even parking fines have declined because of the COVID pandemic. This means that property taxes are more critical than ever to creating some level of sustainability for local government services. So what type of property is taxable? Well, as realtors know, you know that real property, which includes land and improvements, is the primary item which is taxed. But I'm also responsible for valuing what's called business personal property, which includes furniture, equipment, machinery, your computers. It also includes airplanes, mobile, both commercial and general aviation aircraft, mobile homes, boats, and even racehorses. By profession and core function, most of my employees are essentially real estate appraisers. Fair, accurate values are key to both reliable revenue as well as equity for taxpayers. The valuation of property is, of course, important. However, the appraisal function and methodology that my employees use is not necessarily what's most important to property owners. But one component that does matter to taxpayers and property owners occurs in what we call our ownership division. This is the unit of my office that analyzes deeds, building permits, and other records to determine whether a property is required to be reassessed. As you know, in California under Prop 13, property is only reassessed when there's a change in ownership or new construction. There are a number of common mistakes that take a lot of time from the ownership division and its public service unit. One of the most common involves trusts and other legal ownership entities. Moving property into a trust or out of a trust legally is a transfer and therefore reassessable. However, if you are transferring your property from your name into a trust in your name, generally there are rules that allow that to not be reassessable. However, trusts are complicated legal devices and often result in inadvertent mistakes that lead to a reassessment and supplemental tax bill. For instance, if the trust is between you and an entity controlled by you, we need to be able to verify that fact, which typically can be done by providing us with a copy of the entire trust. Any deviation, no matter how seemingly inadvertent it may be, will lead to a reassessment. People oftentimes, when they put property into a trust or take it out, they might add a name or delete a name from the trust. That is a change in ownership and that will be reassessed. Importantly, if you ever get a letter from my office requesting information or documentation, it's critical that you provide it. Failure to provide that information, or in some cases refusal, does not eliminate my duty to enroll a value on that property. It just means we're going to make that decision without the necessary information and we will guess. And just as a FYI, we don't guess on the low side. If you need more information about trusts, I have a guide that you can print down on my website, assessor.lacounty.gov, called Trusts and Tax Savings, and that answers some of the most common questions for the most common situations. Another common and valuable ownership exclusion or tax savings program is what I'm sure you're all familiar with, the parent-to-child transfer, also known as Prop 58, which is subject to change in the November election. But it allows children who inherit property from their parents to keep their parents' tax base. If you don't apply, you will be reassessed to current market value and maybe taxed to such an extent that you can't keep the home. It's important to remember that Prop 58 must be applied for in order to take advantage of that exclusion, even if the property is in a trust, because it's the exclusion form, not the trust, that prevents the reassessment. We also administer a number of programs that help property owners save money on their taxes. One such program, you may have heard me talk about this in the past, I harp on it a lot, is the homeowner's exemption, which is the most basic program that's easily available to anyone who owns their home and lives in it. And I'm really pushing it right now because a lot of people are struggling because of COVID. And I know that the homeowner's exemption is not a huge savings, but right now anything we can do to keep money in people's pocket, I'm committed to do. The homeowner's exemption allows me to reduce the taxable value of a home by $7,000, which translates into a $70 annual savings, which may not be very much, but over time it can be significant. Every year, about $30 million in tax savings go unclaimed in LA County. For example, our data shows that, for instance, the city of Palmdale has the highest number of homeowners who don't apply for the homeowner's exemption at almost 50%. In Tri-Counties area, city of Walnut, about a third of the residents don't apply. Diamond Bar, about 33%. City of La Puente, about 36%. And the primary reason they don't apply is because they simply don't know about it. My office doesn't have the resources to communicate this to homeowners. But I always like to talk, when I'm speaking to realtors, I like to emphasize this because I think this is really good information that you can use in your digital or email marketing or even your direct marketing. If I were looking to hire a realtor and they're telling me a way to save money, I think I look favorably upon them. We have information on our website that you're welcome to copy and paste and share with your clients. And another tip is when your clients are going in for closing, make sure the escrow officer has a copy of the homeowner's exemption so they can sign up right away. There are other savings programs available for my office for people living with disabilities, for veterans, and for those affected by natural disasters, such as the recent Bobcat or lake fires. There's a button on my website that says lower my taxes. It'll tell you about all these programs and how to apply. So the primary responsibility of the assessor is the production of the annual assessment roll, which essentially is the inventory of all taxable property in the county. All revenues generated through property taxes go to local government, county services, city services, and public schools. I am required by law to complete the annual assessment roll by June 30th every year. We work on a fiscal year. And while our valuations must be fair and equitable to taxpayers, it's also critical that the assessment roll be thorough and complete. Because if we don't account for everything, then that means our taxable property dollars that should be allocated to those services we all depend on go uncollected. Property values are established on January 1st of each year. We call that the lien date. Again, the assessment roll also serves as an important planning document for local governments as they prepare their budgets in anticipation of property tax revenues, but it also serves as an important economic indicator, providing some insight as to the health of the real estate market. This year was especially challenging in preparing the assessment roll because of COVID and how it changed the way we normally conduct business. But I can report now that the 2020 assessment roll, which closed on June 30th, came in at $1.77 trillion for the total assessed value of the county, meaning that LA County property values increased 5.97% over the previous year, which was 6.25%. Not to get too deep into the details of the assessment roll, but a few highlights. Transfers of real estate, that is the buying and selling of real estate, were the largest contributors to property value increase, adding $48 billion to the assessment roll. New construction added an additional $12 billion, and the restoration of properties that had been granted a decline in value added $1.44 billion. Most of those properties were in the Antelope Valley. And then the final piece of the property value growth was the annual CPI adjustment, which is capped at 2% under Prop 13. I also need to emphasize, however, that these numbers do not reflect the impact on the real estate market due to COVID. We're anticipating significant impact, particularly on commercial properties, as well as a dramatic increase in assessment appeals and decline in value applications, which will likely reflect a negative market impact. But one of the things that's going to be very confusing this year, people are getting their property tax bills now, and you're not going to see any reduction in this current property tax bill because the values were established on January 1st, just a couple months before the outbreak of COVID. Any reduction in value that occurred starting in March, April, and May will be reflected on the January 1st, 2021 lien date, and then in your tax bill next year. On the plus side, 2020 represents the 10th consecutive year of property value growth in the county. Here's a couple of examples of how a few cities did in the Tri-County area. Diamond Bar grew at 4%. It has an assessed value of over $10 billion spread over 18,000 parcels, including 18,000 single-family residences, 21 rental properties, and 706 commercial properties. La Puente grew at 5.4% for a total assessed value of over $2.5 billion. And City of Walnut grew at 3% with just a little under $6 billion spread over 9,300 parcels. Those lower rates of growth should not suggest to you that that things are going poorly in those cities. It just means that probably fewer properties changed hands. If you're interested in another area or specific city, we can make that data available. In the meantime, I included a data with a breakdown of value for growth in the LA West San Gabriel Valley portion of LA County. And we will be posting my annual report, which will have a city-by-city breakdown. Should be up online within the next week on my website. Median sales price sales prices for single-family homes in LA County, counterintuitively, has steadily increased over the course of the pandemic. The median sales price is now over $800,000, whereas it was at $638,000 back in March when the pandemic accelerated. I also included a table here with median sales prices for a few select cities in the West San Gabriel Valley. I also talked a moment ago about potential increase in decline in value applications. These are also known as Proposition 8. Proposition 8 is what you apply for if you believe that the current market value of your property has fallen below the assessed value, which is more or less the value at the time that you purchased it. If that has occurred, you can file a decline in value and you will get tax relief until that point that your property's value is restored to its base year. I'm required by law to enter the lesser of a property's adjusted base year value or the current market value. A lot of folks are going to be applying this year because of COVID, but again, property values are established on January 1st. Since the pandemic did not affect the economy until late February, early March, those reductions will not be impacted till reflected till next year. But we are accepting decline in value applications through November 30th. Now, let me talk a little bit about the two of the ballot measures that I'm sure that you're all paying very close attention to, that we'll be deciding on in the next 3 weeks. So those are Propositions 15 and 19. As you know, Prop 15 is a constitutional amendment that will modify Proposition 13. It will create what we call a split assessment role, or where it would split off commercial industrial properties and establish a new set of assessment requirements. Under the measure, residential and agricultural land, including multifamily residential, will remain under the current Prop 13 valuation scheme, but commercial and industrial properties will need to be reassessed either annually or cyclically, but no more than every 3 years. The other measure is Prop 19, which would allow homeowners who are 55, disabled, or victims of natural disaster to transfer their property tax bases with them when they sell their home and purchase a new one. It creates a level of portability of your historic property tax base. Unlike the current law, which allows you to move once to a home that is of equal or lesser value, in one of only 15 participating counties, the new one will allow you to move up to 3 times and purchase any value of home in any county in the state. It also applies new restrictions on the parent-to-child inheritance. It limits the inheritance of property to $1 million in value, and requires that the family member live in the home as a residence and not use it as a Airbnb rental. So let me tell you a little bit about how Prop 15 in particular will impact my office, and just from an administrative perspective. So as I mentioned, I have 1,400 employees. About half of them are appraisers. And of those appraisers, about 100 of them are commercial industrial appraisers who are qualified to do complex valuations. State standards across all assessors are that to be a commercial appraiser, you need a minimum of 5 years training. And then that after 5 years, you're not going to be assigned to do the new Inglewood Stadium. You're going to be assigned to do more simple commercial properties like strip malls. So our analysis, Prop 15, suggests that we're going to need to hire an additional 500 appraisers, commercial industrial appraisers. Keep in mind, I only have 100 right now. The reason being is that under Prop 13, currently, only about 5,000 to 10,000 commercial properties are reassessed annually. However, there's 140,000 commercial properties in LA County that will fall under the terms of Prop 15. Now that would, so even if we only have to do 1/3 of them each year for 3 years, that's about 45,000 properties. So that, as you can see, going from 5,000 to 10,000 assessments a year to 45,000 is going to be an explosion in our workload. Appraisals are labor intensive. You need a qualified appraiser to do that work. And obviously, I'm going to have to hire 500 people and give them 5 years training before we could actually be effectively do that work. The measure requires that the first assessment role that needs to include the new valuations is January 1st of 2023. The physics of it are just such that there's no way that I can hire that many people and have them do the work during that period of time. I'm also concerned that there's going to be an explosion of assessment appeals. Obviously, reappraising 45,000 commercial properties with not enough appraisers or underqualified appraisers doing the work is going to generate a lot of questions and a lot of assessment appeals. And that will also take away a lot of our ability to get the work done. But more importantly, I'm very concerned that those agencies, that we call them tax agents, these are people who represent taxpayers in assessment appeals, they're probably going to come in and steal some of my best, most seasoned employees because they're private industry and they pay a whole lot more money. So that's going to be a big challenge for us. I believe that we probably cannot effectively begin to implement Prop 15 in anything less than 5 years. And realistically, I think 10 years is probably more realistic. So my staff and I are already working with other assessors to identify fixes and clarifications that are going to need legislative action immediately in the next legislative session. I'll tell you that I've been in the political world my whole life, and my instincts are telling me right now that if I had a bet, I think I'd bet on Prop 15 passing, leading in the polls, outspending the opponents 2-1. And I think the nature of this election is a lot of these occasional voters who are going to only vote or coming out to vote the top of the ticket are going to be much more inclined to follow party lines in the recommendations for other measures. So we'll see what happens. I'm not sitting on my hands, though. We've been working very, very hard to identify strategies to implement this, but I won't lie to you, it's going to be very, very difficult for the first few years. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have about these when we get that portion. There's a few questions that always come up when I speak with members of the public. I'm going to end my time by trying to answer them in advance. So one that comes up all the time, gets people in trouble constantly, is what to do upon the death of a property owner. To avoid getting reassessed, it is essential that you notify the assessor's office, and the law requires that you notify us within 150 days of death by filing what's called the Change in Ownership Death of Real Property Owner form. Failure to do so can complicate inheritance, and especially if you want to take advantage of the parent-to-child transfer program. Tax bills have gone out, and I'm getting lots of calls from people asking why their property taxes went up so much. Your property taxes don't go up so much. They will never, ever, ever go up more than 2%. So if you had a huge bump on your property tax bill, it wasn't the property taxes. The property tax bill may have 15 items, and only one of them is property taxes. It includes schools and roads and sewers and vector control. None of those have anything to do with your property taxes other than the fact that it may be tied to your property's value. The only things that will cause your property to increase in assessment is if you do new construction, like a new pool or a second floor or an ADU. But the rule of thumb is if you add square footage, the new square footage will be reassessed. It's also important to note that like a kitchen remodel, a bathroom remodel, or roof replacement, in most cases are not reassessed because you're just replacing what's already there. And then the third thing was we get a lot of calls about what to do when there's a conflict in assessor records and building records from the city, from building and safety or planning department. The rule of thumb is the city records are always the correct legal records. They're the ones who determine what can take place on property. On the other hand, if the assessor becomes aware that there is an ADU, but that's not permitted, we'll still record it and assess it. But the fact that we've assessed it doesn't make it legal. We assess what we see, but we don't opine on its legality. And finally, I want to remind you, I talk to realtors all the time, and frankly, realtors are probably the most important stakeholder that we have in the office of the assessor. We're all in the real estate business. We view you as an important conduit to get information to the public. We also want to provide information to you to help you with your own career development. We have created a unique tab on our website just for realtors. It's called Real Estate Professionals. We put information on there that we invite you to clip and paste and share with your clients in your email and direct mail marketing. Put some other tools in there that will be helpful. Our job is to help you be better informed, and hopefully you can share some of this information and get some of these confusing points of real estate assessment clarified for the public. So that's pretty much a look inside my office. I really want to thank you for the invitation and taking the time to listen. And I particularly want to thank Mary, Laura, and Christine and Tim from Tri-Counties for setting up this meeting and welcoming me. I'm now happy to take any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you. That was very, very informative, but we seem to have some questions for you.
Sure.
We're going to start with, if I can get them open. I guess I can't, I need some help with that. In your view, Mr. Prang, how has the pandemic affected the role of government, and what has changed in your position the most?
Well, I can't speak for all of government. I can speak for what happened here. So we had to move all of our people to telework in a very short period of time. And that was logistically very, very challenging. And it did have a negative impact on our work, and it still does. Our employees working from home don't have the same type of equipment and technology that they have here. In our offices, our appraisers, they have double screens and extra large screens allow them to look at drawings that at home they may have a small laptop. If they care for parents or for children, they're distracted throughout the course of the day. So individual production has decreased. On the plus side, we've not been doing assessment appeals for the last 6 months. So a lot of my efforts, which are normally applied to appeals, are helping us make up for in getting other production done. We have employees who've been impacted by COVID and sometimes are unavailable to work for a long time. But I think we've found a rhythm, and we are getting the job done. As I mentioned previously, we closed the roll at a nearly 6% growth rate over last year, which created some type of fiscal sustainability, at least for the moment. But it has been very, very challenging.
Oh, I bet. One more, we remain supportive of efforts to ensure residents can remain in their homes, as 38% of realtors own at least one rental property, while more than 40% of rental units across the nation are owned by mom and pop landlords. In California, unfortunately, the home ownership rate is decreasing, not increasing, as people move out of state or forgo owning altogether. What are some local solutions to our housing crisis from your perspective as countrywide elected official?
That's a tough question. I am actually not, our job as the administrators of a piece of the property tax system, I'm not necessarily an expert in housing policy, but I have been involved in government, and I was a city council member for a long time. And I think one of the biggest challenges is one, I do believe that CEQA, while it's an important law that helps protect environmental considerations, I think it also has some looseness in it, which has allowed it to become to throw down roadblocks from the ability to build housing, making it much more expensive and creating significant delays. We need to be able to do as much infill housing in places where it's already developed. And cities, while I represent a city that had single family homes, in those areas where increased zoning can be allowed, we're going to need to be a little bit more permissive. I'm not necessarily an advocate for taking zoning from R1 to R4 and moving from one single family homes to 30-story buildings, but I believe there with with proper zoning, we could at least add a little bit more density into some neighborhoods. Because the other risk of not allowing development where there's already development means that we have to allow further intrusion into agricultural land. And as we get more populated, we need to have land to grow the food that we're all going to eat. We do need to build more affordable housing. I don't have an answer for dealing with people who resist having affordable housing in their neighborhoods. When I was on the city council in West Hollywood, we built about 15 affordable housing units, our buildings with over 250 units that were mixed into very high property value areas. And we did so without incident. And even the people who objected to them overcame those objections because we did quality projects and took into consideration the sensitivities that people in the neighborhood have. So so the NIMBYs are going to have to give a little bit, and developers are going to have to build a little bit less in order to get more for everybody.
Okay, we have a few questions. I'm trying to see if I can.
I can read them, Mary.
Pardon?
I can read them if you want.
Yes, please.
Okay. So we have a couple questions in the question and answer box. How many individuals are on the county tax appeals board, and how are they set up in districts, and what are the qualification of these individuals to be on such a board that rule on these major issues?
I'm glad you asked that, and I'm going to make a little pitch along with that. So the Assessment Appeals Board, I hope I'm not going to give too long of an answer, but Assessment Appeal, under California Constitution, the Assessment Appeals Board is the Board of Supervisors. Legislation was passed in the 60s that allowed the Board of Supervisors to appoint, in large counties, to appoint Assessment Appeals Board members to relieve them of some of that responsibility. There are 5 Assessment Appeals Boards in LA County, each consisting of 3 members. And they're not static on each board. They have a pool of 15 members, and they assemble panels of 3, depending on who's available. It's to be a member of the Assessment Appeals Board, you need to be an attorney, a CPA, a licensed broker, or a real estate appraiser. So there are minimum qualifications. Members are appointed by the Board of Supervisors. Each member of the Board of Supervisors appoints 3. They also appoint a couple of alternates as well. This is, I'll tell you, the system isn't working. The challenge is the Assessment Appeals Board members are part-time. They get paid a stipend, I think $150 for time in the morning, and maybe another $100 if they're there for the afternoon. The workload is full-time. We have 30,000 cases waiting to be heard. If we did not take another appeals case from today, for the next 2 years, it would take us to get rid of the backlog we have right now. Because if you're an attorney or a CPA and you're still active in your field, you can't come in 5 days a week for 8 hours a day. You've got a job to run. So they might give us 3 hours every other week. So the workload continues to increase. It also means that some of our most active Assessment Appeals Board members, because it's the largest pool of candidates, are retired residential real estate brokers. And if you have time to commit, if you are a broker, you may have to have a minimum number of years of experience. I'm not sure about that, but I urge you to apply, because the Board of Supervisors come to me all the time asking if we can help them recruit qualified board members. So when people hear about the workload and the number of days, it can be discouraging. But you sit like a judge. They actually sit in courtrooms. It's kind of frankly, it's kind of cool. I'd love to do it myself. But those are the basics. If Prop 15 passes, that's going to explode. We're estimating that we'll have to impanel another 15 3-member panels.
Wow.
So the county needs you. You can, if you're interested in applying to be on the Assessment Appeals Board. I'm not involved in that. The Executive Office of the Board of Supervisors makes those decisions, but I'd be happy to direct you to the appropriate folks.
Great,
Okay, great.
thank you.
Assessor, there was a last question, and then one came in through the Q&A that deals with this 2-pronged question, and it's You know, you talk about your strategic plan and in working together through the agency with the different departments, and then also taxpayer inquiries. I know you told us a story of how construction sometimes doesn't get recorded properly coming in from certain cities. And we have one individual here, one member who said, how does a client change an error in reporting, such as bedrooms and bathrooms? And since they purchased a home, how do we go about that?
So I'm going to let my expert on these types of issues, who's on the line with us, Carol Kwan's a special assistant in our office. You've probably seen her in the past. She comes and speaks to the realtors a lot, and she fields a lot of these types of inquiries. Carol, can you give a better answer than me on this?
Sure. They're asking how can they update their building data line on assessor records, and we have a form that's available on our website, assessor.lacounty.gov, and it's called the Property Data Change Request. All they need to do is fill it out and return it to our office. We will review it and update the records accordingly. If there is a square footage discrepancy, we would probably need to do a field inspection. However, due to COVID, some of these in-person field inspections may take a little bit longer. But whatever pictures, information they have when they submit that property data change request, if they can submit that with the request, that would be most helpful.
One of the things I want to add to that is right now, following Carol's direction is the best way to do it. But I think I've spoken to in the past, let you know that we're spending about $100 million to totally replace our technology platform. And when we're done, which should be sometime late next year, you will be able to go onto our website and submit these changes online, and it will go online to one of our appraisers who will make the adjustments or schedule a site visit if required. It'll be much easier and faster once that's up and operational.
Okay, great. California Assembly Bill number 2458 directs the county treasurer and tax collector to provide information on its website regarding school district parcel tax exemptions, such that school districts placing a parcel tax on the county property tax bill are required to provide information on their website related to exemption from the parcel tax. And I'm looking at it for seniors. So is there a way to make this process any more streamlined?
So though I'm not that familiar with that bill, but from as it was described, it actually is a directive for the treasurer and tax collector, which is a different agency than mine. I don't have an answer for that, but Carol, do you know anything about that or how that's?
No, I don't. Usually though, with certain exemptions, that would be handled by the auditor controller's office, because they're the ones who apply the various direct assessments, or they apply the tax rates. So usually the agency would have a form that the senior would fill out and then send back to that agency, who would forward it to the auditor controller's office.
Okay, this is for senior exemptions. So, okay, great. Laura, do you have any more questions? You're on mute.
Yeah. Christine, do we have any more that we should? I know there were a few in there that Christine was working.
Yeah, there's some just about, I think, COVID relief in general. There's a lot with, of course, you know, we have a lot relative to landlord-tenant relationship, especially now with COVID and AB 3088. How does that factor into anything, if at all? Probably not, but are you seeing more inquiries as a result of state rent control?
No, we haven't seen anything that we can quantify regarding state rent control. We do get a lot of tax collector questions, simply because, as I mentioned before, people don't know the difference between the various departments. I can say that at least the tax collector was very, very aggressive and generous in providing temporary relief late property taxes that were due back in April, and they're granting waivers of late fees. All you gotta do is mention COVID and as being a reason you're likely to get a waiver of any late penalties if you're unable to pay on time. But we've not been able to quantify the impacts of that measure at this point.
Okay, I have from Josephine Taylor. She wants to know, what if the property originally recorded with misinformation?
Oh,
Just
yeah,
want-
he just answered that one. So, yeah, we touched on that in the form, and so we provided that link.
Okay,
And so a lot of these tend to be specific questions. And I know, Mary, you know, you had a focus on what the housing industry looks like, and I know Assessor Prang, given his involvement in local government for so long, what does that look like, sustaining a solid foundation for our properties?
One thing I can tell you right now is that I just was advised by my staff last week that a number of reports, and we're trying to collaborate that with our own data, is based on sales. Commercial property values have declined about 25% since the advent of COVID. You know, with office buildings emptying out, and one of the things we're anticipating and already seeing is that, for example, a lot of downtown offices are finding that having their employees work from home is working for them, and they may see an opportunity to save money rather than spending dollars on rent for Class A offices. Also, because of COVID, a lot of retail businesses have either gone out of business or they're closed. They're not paying rent, and all of those things are having putting downward pressure on commercial property in particular. Industrial's a little different story. You know, warehouses are actually doing really well right now because of the people are ordering from home, and warehouse space is now at a premium. As I mentioned, that median sales price of properties have been going up rather dramatically, but that's also kind of a misleading and false figure, because the number of transactions has fallen off precipitously year over year. Inventory is down because a lot of folks, particularly at the lower and median price levels, have been pulled off the market due to COVID. So the properties which are selling are at the higher end, and we're seeing bidding wars simply because inventory is so low. But we're anticipating seeing similar trends throughout the course of the next year, and continuing to see downward trends on commercial property. If Prop 15 passes, I think there'll be a little bit of chaos in figuring out how things are going to go in the next year or two.
So I have a question. Someone's asking, you were talking earlier about possible COVID relief in assessments for next year. And does that apply to primary residents, or can that be used for income property as well?
So there's not COVID relief in assessments, but in property taxes. So if you're required to pay your property taxes, the 2 installments on the delinquency date, but a lot of people, businesses in particular, if they didn't have revenue and they didn't have the ability to pay, they didn't pay. And as you know, there's an automatic 10% penalty for late payment. The tax collector does have the authority to waive late penalties, and is doing so. There's 40,000 applications came in for penalty waivers for people who were not able to pay their property taxes on time. As I just spoke with the tax collector this week, he has not made any decisions about the next round of property taxes, but because things have not changed, he's likely to again grant penalty waivers if you're not able to pay your taxes on time.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mary, do you have any other questions? I don't see any other questions coming in.
I know. Christine or Tim, do you guys have any other questions?
I did want to say,
Tim's been awfully quiet, so he has to have a question.
Unfortunately, I don't. I thought your presentation was very, very informative, Mr. Prang. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I did want to let everybody know I put my contact information, my email address, my phone number into the chat room. If you have questions, or feel free to call us or shoot me an email. Carol Kwan also put her contact information as well. So add that to your address book and feel free to reach out if you need us.
Well, thank you, sir. It was very, very informative. And I can't tell you how much we really appreciate it and appreciate your time.
We might want to schedule a time for me to come back after the election, should these measures pass, to give you an update in a few months about how we're dealing with them.
Absolutely. And if there's anything that we can do as realtors, you just reach out and let us know.
I appreciate that very much. It was great to see you all. Thank you very much for including me, and please stay safe.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone for attending today. And we hope to see you at the legal panel and the global event, November 4th and 5th. Before we go, please, everyone, stay safe and stay healthy. And that's a wrap.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Laura,
you, Laura.
You're welcome.
Can you
Bye.
pull his, Laura, can you pull his, the assessor's information so that we can put it online in case they want it or need it on our website?
You mean his phone number and everything?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, hon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for all your
Bye.
hard work, Christine and Tim.